Welcome to the Unleashed Life, where ambitious women take control of their mindset, money, and mastery. I'm your host, Dr. Renée Baker. Let's get unleashed. Welcome back to the Unleashed Life. So today I am joined by Lauren Wittenberg-Weiner, PhD, author of Unruly. Lauren is the founder and former CEO of WWC Global, a company that grew into a major government contractor. She is a military spouse, a mentor, a leader, and she also did a TEDx. So she's a TEDx speaker. And as a leader, Lauren knows how to find freedom inside the rules. Her work challenges the status quo, and my work is about living unleashed. So today we are exploring the space where the two ideas meet. And I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome, Lauren.
Renee, I am so excited to be here. I think this is going to be so much fun.
This is going to be a lot of fun, and there's so many things to talk about. But first, let me just say congratulations on the book, Unruly. You are already a bestseller. What, the book has been out, 2 months?
It's been out almost, we're coming up on 3 months. And it was that first week we hit the bestseller list for USA Today and Publishers Weekly, and we were the Porchlight July best business book, which I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but it was awesome.
Well, it's wonderful to see the success and have this opportunity to speak with you. But let's get into your background and this concept of Unruly. But you've built your career. You've had corporate experiences, entrepreneurship, and now being an author, best-selling author. Let's talk about the personal experiences that push you towards writing Unruly and shaping this philosophy.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in college, I was the ultimate rule follower, right? When somebody told me to do something, I would be like, not only will I do that, I will overdo it. And I will get the A+, and I will do it faster and earlier. I finished college in 3 years because why would you ever do that? But that was what I thought I needed to do. Went to graduate school, and for a lot of reasons, graduate school was rough. There was a lawsuit many, many years later about some of the problems that happened within my department at Dartmouth. But at the time, I didn't really think about that. I just was like, this is not where I want to be. Right. And so for the first time, I had done everything I was supposed to do. I was able to do what I wanted to do. I was able to be a professor, or at least get a great postdoc at another Ivy League school. And I decided I didn't want to do it. And everyone was looking at me like I was crazy.
Yes.
Right. And so I chose not to. Ended up at the White House, which was a great pivot. Not where I ever intended to be. One of my good friends from high school was like, sounds like you want to do public policy. I'm like, I don't know what that means. But sure, that sounds great. So I ended up doing this amazing dream job in the White House. And then I met my husband, and he had been in the military. So I'm sort of a military spouse because he had been in the military, but he was a civilian for the military by the time I met him. Right. And he got military orders to Italy. And it was great, amazing. It was right as Under the Tuscan Sun came out. So I thought we were going to Tuscany.
Right.
Naples is not Tuscany. It's not Tuscany. So we land there, and there was no kidding, Renee. It was hilarious. There was an actual dumpster fire when we first landed there. The dumpster was actually on fire.
What a sign.
I looked at my husband. I'm like, brand new husband, right? We had 4 days to get married. I looked at him and I was like, what did you do to me? And it just got worse because I was told military spouses weren't allowed to work on base. Right. So I didn't do well with that. I didn't have kids at that point. Even if I had kids, I just can't, I'm not built to sit at all. And so I started a firm. Just actually one of my friends incorporated a firm for me, just for me to have some work back to the States until I could get home and restart my career. And it took off. And so we built this firm. It wasn't what I ever intended to do. We built it to $100 million in annual revenue a year over the course of 18 years. So it took a long, long time to do it. But we did it each turn. We did it on our own terms, right? In our own way. So every turn in my life, people were telling me, you're wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're not supposed to do that. And So Unruly came kind of out of this idea of why not? Why can't I do it this way? And really, I mean, we made sure we were never breaking rules. I am still a rule follower to the extreme, probably to sometimes my detriment, but there were ways of finding space within the rules. And so we had a lot of stuff that we talked about throughout the almost 20 years in the firm in teaching our employees how to find that space within the rules. So that became kind of the basis of Unruly.
Oh, I love this story. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I think a lot of times people think about um, breaking the rules as being unruly, but essentially, just like Unleash, you're not breaking the rules. You're finding
No,
a way to work with inside the structure and maybe like challenging the status quo in a very respectful way, because just because it's always been a certain way doesn't mean that it always needs to be that way.
and then I think there is a piece of it, and I don't want to kind of ignore this piece as
Right.
well. There are times when the rules don't work, right?
Right.
There are times when the rules either stop working or they never worked or they were designed to be unfair. And so
Right.
there is an advocacy piece here too to changing the rules. But again, I tend to come at this from first figure out what the rules are, then figure out where there's space in the rules. And then once you figure out that the rules are unfair, then yeah, get loud, do the advocacy piece. But I think it takes first understanding the way the systems are built so that you can find the places where it makes sense to break the rules or
I
to
think that's
upend the rules.
yeah, that's a really good point, because you seek to understand first, not just going there and blowing up the spot. So seeking
Right.
to understand first, because rules can be scaffolding or they can be cages, right? So
Absolutely.
some can give us structure, others box us in. So it's just trying to find that component.
Yep.
So you start this company and you are like, okay, I'm a military spouse, and now what what am I supposed to do? You start this amazing company, it takes off, and 18 years for a company to take off to create what you've created is not a long time. But I've also, just kind of building on the discussion around rules, you've said that rules can be both enabling and constraining.
Mhm.
So how do you distinguish between the rules that are simply convention and those that carry moral responsibility?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So look, I think there are, and I distinguish in the book between written and unwritten rules. Right. So the written rules are actually black letter law, case law, all of the stuff that goes along with legal responsibilities. And I think moral responsibilities tend to come in there even if they're not written as American law. But I think those are usually one of those things that you just don't completely upend. However, there is almost always space within those rules that people don't see. So inevitably, when I was talking to someone about black letter law, either legislation or regulation or policy guidance or whatever, and it was written, they would tell me it said something. And when I went back to the source documents, it didn't say that. It didn't say nearly that. It wasn't as constraining as they said that it was. So I think the written rules, they're hard to upend when you're actually challenging them unless they're unfair. But there's so much of what happens in life that is unwritten rules.
Right.
And that's the conventions. That's the way the game gets played. And you still have to understand that. Like, I want to be really clear. It's not just you can go through and go, y'all don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to change the way that this is going to go, because you're going to smack into a brick wall if you do that.
That's
Right.
right.
However, if you turn around and say, I want to understand how the game is played, and then I'm going to choose pieces of that are going to distinguish me from other people, and they're more authentic to who I am and what I want to do, and I'm going to upend those, knowing what the consequence is going to be, knowing what people are going to say, knowing what people might do, and having a response to that,
Right.
both for the written and the unwritten rules. I think that's where the magic lies.
So I mean, listen, that is something that, if you're listening, just remember that, like, just where the magic lies. You want to go into spaces, understand those spaces, and if you're going to make a change, be prepared to stand on that conviction that
Yes.
you have.
Yes.
But first, But if you don't understand that, that could go kind of south in a
Yes.
negative way.
Yes.
Um, so, but how do you then explain a little bit about how do you balance then the compliance of following the rules with this? I wouldn't say like rebellious edge, but just kind of like I'm ready to change it, which is, I mean, it's essentially the title, being a little unruly, but still
Yep.
balancing your compliance.
Look, again, I think there is, like, I was in government contracting, which is probably one of the most heavily regulated industries out there. And
Yes,
we went through audit after audit after audit because that's what they do.
that's right.
And we didn't have a finding, like, ever. It was ridiculous. We did everything to the letter exactly right. That said, so I don't think you ever throw out compliance, but again, compliance is not conformity necessarily, right? You have to comply with the letter of the law
Right.
and generally with the spirit of the law. However, if you can get really good about interpreting the law, there's a lot of space within there. And I say in the book, and I say a lot in speaking, there are certain things you don't throw out the rule book on, right? Accounting, not something to throw out the rule book. There's no reason to do it. Don't do it differently than what the accounting standards would be, because unless it's giving you an advantage and you've checked your boxes. So
That-
if you are an accounting firm who is looking at doing something on a new software or whatever, yeah, throw out some of the old guard standards, but don't throw out the rules. But if you're looking at, someone like me who isn't an accountant by nature,
That's right.
we threw out a whole lot of other conventions found, in that blue ocean, red ocean kind of concept. We found our blue water
That's right.
consistently and got away from the scrummy kind of competitive waters by finding those places. But those places were still fully in compliance. And then, Renee, we documented the heck out of everything we did
Standard
so
up.
that when somebody inevitably came back and said, you can't do that, we had memos that said, this is how we can do it. And you can see that we had these memos from the time we did this. We're not recreating it after the fact. We knew what we were doing even from the outside.
Right. So you had all of the processes documented. So no games were played. I'm also in I wasn't working finance, right?
Right.
So very heavily
Yeah.
regulated. And if you're going to change something or you want to challenge the status quo, make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's, have your standard operating procedures, and
100%.
document, because you're not suggesting to ignore compliance. And I would never say that, and neither would you. But what we're saying is working within that boundary. And I love what you said about discovering what your blue ocean is versus
Mhm.
what the red ocean is, because a lot of times people don't think about what it means to have a different type of mindset and
Mhm.
what it means to be able to disrupt in the most positive way that's going to help create more lasting change rather than just changing rules that are going to create more problems for you.
Yes. Yes. Look, changing rules consistently or getting outside of the norms makes more work for you. It does.
Right.
Right? My team used to drive, I used to drive them crazy because I was like, well, we could do A or we could do B, but we could do a hybrid solution of A plus B plus a little bit of D and E and F. And they were like, boss, that doesn't work without us doing a whole lot extra work. So you
Right.
have to figure out the return on investment
Mhm.
of changing and upending the way that everyone does things, and only do it when it makes the most sense to do it.
I love that. Just thinking more broadly, when does it make sense? And getting that feedback is also key, because you're leaning into your team and they're saying, no, like this sounds like a great idea. And in execution, it's going to be more challenging.
Yep.
So, I mean, I appreciate that, because even if you're a leader that's listening or whether you're an entrepreneur that's listening, the same rules apply, right?
Right.
So, really thinking about how to create rules that can create more freedom, not less freedom. And that's the next point that I want to talk about, because you have your experience in this high stakes game of government contracting, heavily regulated, and your goal is to change the way things have been done in the most compliant way.
Mhm.
So Can you share a little bit more around your experience when following the rules created more freedom versus less? Because we spoke about how changing the rules can help create what is the ROI? How can it create more freedom? But sometimes you want to be within those rules,
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
how does that work?
Absolutely. Look, there are certain things, like I said, accounting,
Right.
not something to recreate, right? There are ways of doing things. And I think I've always distinguished between the places where you can find that blue ocean, the places where you can find your distinguisher have to be few and far between. You've got to do most things standard.
Right.
Because if you're not doing the standard for everything, you are just making way too much work for yourself.
It works.
Right. And so let's do the standard that you need to hit 90, 95%. I don't know, whatever the number would be. So find those spaces that are really going to distinguish you. Find those open places where you're not. And I talk in the book about, blue water, red water, and then black water. Right, because I was reading both the blue ocean strategy at the same time I read Eric Prince's Blackwater kind of
Yeah.
memoir, and realize that there's a lot of stuff that is just wrong, right? You get into blue water, you get into that open, not competitive space because you're breaking the rules. Don't do
Right.
that.
Don't do that.
But for that blue water, you can find small spaces that distinguish you
That's right.
without reinventing everything.
Most of the time, I love that you're saying that because most of the time, when you think about blue versus red, you're thinking, okay, I have to have this wide distinction. What I'm hearing from you, like just focus on innovation, focus on the value creation instead of just direct competition. And
Yeah.
then understanding that sometimes with the red ocean, it's just mostly condition driven. And it's I feel like red ocean is like win or lose.
Yeah. Well, look, Red Ocean, if you're competing on the same structure that everyone else is competing on, right? There's nothing aside from probably price
Right.
at that point that distinguishes you. And at least in government contracting, there were a whole lot of firms that sat in that red ocean space and they duked it out and they did it by dropping their prices lower and lower and lower and lower. And inevitably, at some point, they became unable to actually perform the work. But it didn't matter because the government at one point had decided that lowest price technically acceptable with a very low bar for technical acceptability was the right standard. And the only way you end up putting yourself out of that competition where it's lower and lower and lower prices, lower and lower and lower margins, and lower and lower and lower service provision was to find a totally different ocean and compete in a totally different space.
So instead of taking a piece of the pie, you're saying,
Yeah. Build a different pie.
yeah,
Build a different pie. Yes.
you don't always have to have the same pie just because we all like cherry pie. Maybe it's time for apple pie. So you're not taking a smaller piece of the
Correct.
cherry pie. You just build a new pie. And guess what? But people like both pies, but now you have an entire pie to yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That is we need to be thinking about that more innovation driven,
Mhm.
more creating a new level of demand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So kind of building on that, and in your book Unruly, you talk about one of my favorite phrases is finding space within the rules. And I love that phrase because that can apply to anyone, any journey, no matter what you're going through. And we
Yes.
talked about that a little bit. But what I want to hear from you, Lauren, is what does that look like in practice for someone who is trying to express authenticity and still achieve big goals on a human, personal level, it could be, or if they're building or creating a business. But I
Yeah.
think more personally.
Yeah, look, I mean, and I talk in the book about one of my favorite chapters in the book is don't climb every mountain.
Mhm.
Um, and this came out of a concept early and then later when I was in graduate school and decided that I didn't want to be a professor anymore. I really struggled with it because everyone around me was saying, well, you've made it. You have to do this.
Right.
This is the next step, right? And this was the first time that I ever got off the treadmill or stopped climbing the mountains in front of me, to use the analogy that I used in the book. And one of my what turned out to be one of my closest friends and mentors for years. I called him up, had met him once before, and
Mhm.
said, I'm really struggling with this. I don't know what to do. Which of these jobs do I take? And he was like, you don't want to take any of them. I'm like, right. But so which one do I take? Because it
Right.
didn't occur to me that I could not take any of them and do something entirely different. And the same thing happened when we went to sell the company, or when I was thinking about where we were going to go with the company. And I kind of hit this wall where I was like, we could do this. We could do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I know we're actually going to be able to succeed at that next thing. We were at 100 million. And I had seen firms, very few of them, do well from 100 to 150 to 250 to, wherever it went from there. And everyone's telling us, you guys are the unicorn. You guys can do this.
Right.
And I stopped and I was like, yeah, we can. I don't want to. And so I stopped and said, okay, what do I actually want? And there's some exercises in the book that I talk through to do this, but it's really just optionality. It's really just trusting your own gut and saying, what matters to me
Right.
right now? And I talk a lot about ruthlessly curating your priorities, right? And it's not, yes, my family is my first priority. Of course, my family is my first priority. It is. However, not every single thing in my family is my priority, right? And I talk in the
Yes.
book about not caring about the Halloween costumes or the what did they call it? The Spirit Week costumes for my kids in elementary school or in preschool. I care about my kids. They are my top priority, 100%. But not every single thing about my kids is such a top priority. I care about the holistic picture for my kids. I care about the holistic picture for my company, for myself, but I need to ruthlessly curate which priorities are which and which make sense at that time, and
Right.
then make conscious decisions for my life without worrying about what anyone else says.
Yeah. And I love that. And people really need to lean into that.
Yes.
We have a choice. It's not or, it can be and, or
Yes.
it can be, you know what? I don't want to, or it can, well, I shouldn't say that because it can be or. It can be I can do this or I don't have to.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Or you can do that later. I mean, that I went through this just recently and I posted about it on LinkedIn, got a bunch of comments about it because I was like, I got myself back on a mountain where I was climbing over and over and over again on the book.
yeah.
And I said I had to unruly myself because somebody, my editor, who's amazing, was like, okay, you made the bestseller list. So now here's the next thing that you have to do. And if you don't do this, you failed. Right. And then there was going to be something right after that. And there was going to be something right. And it was like, this is the number of sales you have to get to by the end of the calendar year. And I was like, okay, here we have to. And then I was like, wait a second. I don't care. This
Right.
is not what I care about. This is not what I'm trying to do. I am not trying to be a multi, New York Times bestselling author. I just wanted to get this book out there. If I write another book, great. If I don't, oh, well, but like, I don't have to do this and I'm not going to kill myself to do it. But it
Right.
took me really stopping and going, wait a second, is that the mountain I want to climb? And here's the thing. At some point, yeah, it's like, great. I would love to do that. But it wasn't the top priority. My mom was at the time in the kind of active process of dying. My daughter was going off to prep school. And I was like, I can't, no,
No.
this would be great. It would be a great mountain to climb. I don't want to climb. I can't physically do it right now. So I'm going to stop myself from doing it. Doesn't mean I can't do it later.
So yeah, so you unrulied
I
yourself.
unrulied myself.
You unrulied yourself. And one of my favorite songs is Climb Every Mountain from the Sound of Music. And now it's like, no, you don't have to. You can sing about it, but you don't have
Yeah.
to actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like what you said about just being ruthless about your values and what's important to you. And we all need to lean into that. Well, first, I identify what's important to you. What are your values? We
Yeah.
should all know what, spend the internal work to figure that out.
Yeah.
But and when it comes to unruling yourself, if you need to, you at least know what your limitations would look like. So you all essentially you need your own standing operating procedures for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're going to change as you go and you're going to have to reevaluate them sometimes, annually, sometimes daily, and that's okay. You're never going to be in complete balance, but you got to have the equilibrium across time. to make it work.
To make it work. Yes. Okay. So to make it work, sometimes people want to be more innovative, right? They
Mhm.
want to lean more to that red ocean strategy, and they want to find their flavor of their pie that they will make. But
Yep.
some of us, I mean, like I spent my career in financial services, so I'm accustomed to being in a rigid environment. My husband, military, law enforcement, you with government contracting. But some people, whether they create that rigid environment for themselves or
Mhm.
they're in that environment, how can they find room to kind of break those rules and be a little bit unruly when they're locked in those environments? And just an area of clarification, I'm just talking about breaking ground in like more bureaucratic
Yeah,
systems.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So look, I think there are systems that are very much innovation at all times. We're comfortable with innovation.
Right.
Um, and that I was just talking to a group, a corporate group about innovation, and I called it big I innovation and little I innovation,
Okay.
right? And tech firms, some of the other spaces out there are big I innovation, right? They are like changing, they are moving needles daily. They're throwing out convention. They know they're going to fail a whole lot. Everyone in those spaces is comfortable with that experimentation. There are places like government offices where don't you come at me with that. And I had somebody say, don't you come at me with that innovation. I don't care. Shut up, color, do what you're going to do.
In the lines.
And so you find the space within the comfort zone. It can be marginal changes instead of the big muscle movement changes, but those changes add up pretty quickly. And then you have to understand where the people are coming from within your industry, why they're scared of it, what their incentive structure is. Nobody is trying to be obstinate.
Right.
Nobody's trying to be bureaucratic. So they're fearful of something. They've been taught a certain way. They think they might be in over their head if you change. We had early on, years ago, 20 years ago now, a customer that was a comptroller for the government who was still on a paper ledger. No kidding. They had a book, like a ledger book that was paper ledger. They didn't even have Excel. So
Wow.
if somebody got hit by a bus, which was not uncommon in Italy because the buses were crazy and everyone else was crazy on the streets, literally if somebody got hit by a bus, we would have to go back and try to find the ledger in their desk and figure out where the, millions of dollars that we were spending were allocated. So we moved very slowly, very deliberately, first to an Excel spreadsheet, right? That was the only way that we were going to get them there. And then to an ERP system. And then to, and we did in the background, we did a lot of the heavy lifting to say and make it easier for them to adopt it, easier for them to say yes than it was for them to say no, because they were scared. They were
Right.
scared that their job was going to go away. They were scared they wouldn't know what they were doing and somebody else was going to get hired behind them. They were scared that oftentimes, I think more of what we saw was, oh no, I can't do that. There's a saying in government, I don't look good in stripes, meaning I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to be punished for doing something against the rules. So if you find the space within the rules and then document it and show them, no, 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 this isn't against the rules and it's going to help us this way. And I'm going to be there along with you, kind of moving this along with you, doing that change management. You can actually find that space even in the most bureaucratic places. And honestly, that's where you move the needle the most because
Yes.
those bureaucratic spaces are often the ones where we need the most innovation.
I love that you're saying that because I don't think most people think about that you might be brilliant and you may have a great idea, but usually to your point, it's not personal. People are not trying to address it, but those micro movements matter because there may be some fear on the other side and helping people holding their hand and navigating through the change, which is scary for change is scary for people.
Terrifying.
So even if it happens slow, at least as you said, We're getting you from the ledger to the Excel sheet. We're not going to go from the ledger to AI. That's too much heavy lifting. So I love that. And I look at it as you're looking at innovation as also some level of empathy.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you have to be empathetic to understand the journey that people are on. And some people are stuck because they're afraid. Just be empathetic
Yes.
to that.
Yes. Yes. Look, I'm a big believer in anything in leadership is mostly around don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk. Yes.
Right. So we have a rule in our house. I've got teenagers. And so I have realized that using a very specific swear word every once in a while with teenagers gets them to notice stuff. So our biggest rule in our house is don't be an asshole.
Right.
Right? Like don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Don't be.
And I get their attention by saying the swear word instead of the nicer word. But it really, everything boils down to this. Every time I look at a bad leader, I'm like, they're a bad leader because they don't see the humanity on the other side, because they're not thinking through all of the human pieces of this. They're just thinking about the numbers, and the numbers come.
Yes.
Once you start doing the right thing, all of the rest of it follows.
I wish people, let's say that louder for everyone.
Yeah, right?
And that's in life, that's in business. Like, don't be a jerk, be a good human. And it's human to human. Every time if I'm talking about, money, or I'm talking about marketing, we buy from humans. Like, we are humans. At the end of the day, we're always humans speaking to each other. So just respecting the human environment. And before you try to throw someone in a blue ocean, make sure they can swim.
Yes. Yes.
Like, my goodness. Like, this is not hard when we lead from our hearts and from a human experience. And we can all relate because we're human.
Yep.
So sometimes these habits and these mindsets that help leaders thrive, just kind of like you said, like, just don't be a jerk. But what are some of the habits and mindsets that can help leaders thrive when they're forced to pivot or adapt unexpectedly? So we just talked about, when you have time, we're going to move you from the ledger to Excel. We're going to make sure you know how to swim before you throw you in the blue ocean. But sometimes these pivots happen unexpectedly and leaders are forced to adapt. So what are some of those routines that you have to be able to connect those value mindset practices for those adjustments?
Look, so I had a mentor for years who would say to me, success is not no problems, it's new problems. And every time he said it, and I tell him this all the time, I wanted to throttle him, because I was like, I don't want any forget. Can I have some no problems for a little while until the new problems? But he was right? Because there is no growth without challenge. There is no growth without not knowing what you're doing. I, at every turn, didn't know what I was doing. I had lots of experience behind me by the time I got older and kind of knew what I had done before. But by the time you knew what you had done before, that wasn't a problem anymore. It became, so then you moved on to the next problem and the next problem and the next problem. And so you need to know that that is part of the growth process. I am a big believer. Look, I was in graduate school in a room with a woman doing a brown bag about the imposter syndrome. Yes. Before the imposter syndrome became part of like popular culture, she was talking about it. And I'm sitting there ducking because I'm like, they're going to figure out she's talking about me. Right. Oh. And not that I am, not that I suffer from the imposter syndrome, but I deserve to be here, which is really what the imposter syndrome is, but that I'm actually the imposter. Right. And so I suffered from it mightily for a long time. I started realizing that, first of all, nobody knows what the heck they're doing. Right.
Figuring it out.
The people who say they do are wrong, and they're just posturing. And if they truly think they do, then they just don't know how to ask the right questions. Right. And so when you're hit with a pivot, when you're hit with something unexpected, I think feeling that imposter syndrome or feeling that discomfort, if you own it and say, okay, I'm going to surround myself with smarter people than me. I'm going to ask dumb questions that I feel like are going to put a spotlight on me about, I don't know what I'm doing. But when you say that, your whole team around you goes, okay, no, you can't turn around and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing and help me on it. Right? You can't do that.
Right.
Because as a leader, you do have to have some presence and you do have to have some confidence, and you should have confidence that
Right.
you and your team will figure this out, but you don't know it right up front. And that's normal.
That's normal. And it's
So
okay.
it's okay. It's better than okay. It's actually where the growth happens. And so I think if you can get to that, and then there's all sorts of, again, I talk a lot in the book about kind of some of these pivot moments and figuring out optionality and where you're going to go and how you keep options open. So I think those are all important. But first and foremost, it's just being comfortable in the discomfort that matters.
And that's a tough thing for, that's a tough mindset shift for those of us that are overachievers who think failure is like the fear of failure. I remember for so many years, Lauren, it was the fear of failure until I learned that failure is where the growth happens. It's uncomfortable. It's the messy middle. I don't love it. But then on the other side, it's like, okay, I belong here. I may not know what I'm doing, but I can make a phone call and figure it out.
Mhm.
But owning that space is sometimes really afraid, especially in a world where it feels like everyone is watching, but
Yeah.
not, because things move so quickly.
I gotta tell you, so I have this conversation with both my kids, but particularly my daughter, because girls are suffer more from this than boys do. The spotlight effect, right?
Yes.
This idea that everyone is looking at you and judging you. And I still have it too. So I'd like, I'll give my daughter a bit of a pass because I feel it. But I gotta tell you, nobody's looking at you as much as they think, as much
They,
as you think they're looking at you, because they're too busy worrying about what you're gonna say about what they're doing to worry about what you're doing. So, and I think honestly, failure. So there's a good friend of mine who used to work for me, who every single day will ask his daughters, "What did you fail at today?" And he'll celebrate it. And
right.
I think if we can start celebrating failure as much as we start celebrating success and really start talking about it, look, I fail every single day. And sometimes that's actually, sometimes it's fun, right? To turn around and do something you don't know what you're doing. I tried to play, both my kids play hockey. I tried to play hockey with them a few years ago at a parent-child game, and I was miserably bad at it. Like, oh my gosh, I fell only once, but then the hockey dads were trying to pass me the puck to get a goal, and I was like, please don't do that. Like, I'm using the stick to hold myself up, right? But my kids saw me do something terrifying. I thought I was going to break a bone. And they saw me do something and fail miserably at something that they're good at.
Right.
And I had a blast. Like, you have to be able to, first of all, to laugh at yourself.
That's right.
But second of all, to fail and fail miserably, and then pick yourself up and do it again and learn something from it, or to fail somewhat and keep trying and keep pushing. And it works really well if you're comfortable with that discomfort.
Yeah, so I like getting uncomfortable, living in the discomfort, and I always laugh at myself because not only do I fail, but I also fall. So as a person who
Yes,
always
you do.
falls,
Basically,
potholes,
yes.
potholes don't love me, and like potholes. But you know what? One day I'm not going to fall into a pothole. But what did I learn in that process? I learned sometimes that we have to slow down
Yes.
and it is okay. And
Yes.
we're all going to suck at something. And I had to embrace that. I've embraced that more as an entrepreneur than I did in corporate. And I really do wish that I had that same mentality always, but I didn't, because I was like, win, only win. But later in my career, I started to embrace failure as an opportunity. And I think that we're not imposters or we're not bad, but we have to be willing to suck at something to get good at it. We used to all couldn't, well, I shouldn't say this, but we couldn't walk at one point. Now we can walk. I guess I can't really say that.
You still walk perfectly fine. Just every once in a while, you're doing too many things at once.
I'm doing too much.
Right.
So as we wrap up, I just want to know about, you've we talked about imposter syndrome. We've covered so many things, and I could talk to you all day, Lauren, because you're phenomenal, you're smart, you're brilliant. I love how you work within the the spaces of the rules, but also help us figure out ways to create new spaces. And you spoke a lot about the idea of being a gateway, not a gatekeeper.
Mhm.
And I would like for you to share how leaders can use their privilege or access to open doors for others. And I think that this is so important for all of us, that we can help others along the way.
Yeah. Look, I say, I know I got to certain tables because I was a woman. I know I got to a whole lot fewer tables than I probably should have on my own merits. And so, regardless of how I got to whatever table I got to, my charge to myself was always, first of all, own your seat at that table, show them that you deserve to be there, which is awful that you have to do that. You have to work harder. I know I did. In all of the things that we did in the big contract that we had to put more money into it. We had to put more effort into it. We had to be better than any of the other firms out there that would have been problematic in it, or who would have been kind of more in a traditional kind of male military guys that were there. So I owned my seat at the table.
Right.
But then it is incumbent upon me not only to pull people who look like me to that table, but to pull people who don't look like me or don't think like me, who have even less access to that table than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, when they say there's not room enough at the table, say, fine, then let's blow up the table.
Right.
Let's standing room only. There is no reason. And I think there are two ways that I talk about in the book of doing this. One of them is actively changing the rules, because there are rules that are actively stopping people from doing what they should be doing, actively stopping us from being fair in the world. So that's the advocacy piece. But I think there's this other piece that is, we talk about sponsors, we talk about mentors, we talk about support. I talk a lot about the village of people around me. But I think there is an additional layer that I call Sherpas,
Right.
that are actively packing along with you.
Right.
Right. There are people that I Sherpa, that I mentor, whatever, who are traveling a different path than I did. They have different challenges than I did, but I have enough visibility in what I did and what the industry looks like and what the world looks like, that I can, if I'm standing alongside them, I can say, hey, I don't know, I've never dealt with this before, but from what I know, here's how I would approach it. And let's try it. And I'm right here with you, and I'll catch you if you fall.
We all need a Sherpa in our lives, Lauren. We all do, because that's a gift. Like you said, we have mentors and sponsors, but for someone to walk alongside you and lead you along the way based on their experiences, it also can be benefit both sides of the equation, because you're walking alongside, you're learning from them, they're learning from you, and you're helping to lead the way. And I think I had never heard it framed like that before I heard it from you. And I think we all need to think about how we can be Sherpas for others. And as we become Sherpas, helping others along the way is part of that journey. But also find yourself a Sherpa. And they always don't have to look like you. They don't have to have your background and experience, but someone that's willing to walk alongside of you and show you the way is a
Yes, absolutely.
So I talk about being unleashed. You talk about being unruly, which I love. How do you see those ideas as similar or different? And what's an unleashed moment for you when choosing to conform, change your path? Choosing not to conform, change your path.
I think there are so many similarities in the way that we do this. I talk about the rules maybe differently than you do, but it's pretty much the same concept. And look, none of this, I don't want to take away from either of us on what we've talked about and what we've done, but none of it is rocket science, right?
That's right.
None of this is, somebody else said, it is simple but not easy. They were talking about leadership generally, but I was like, I kind of gravitated toward that concept of what I talk about. I think what you talk about is not complicated,
Yeah.
but it's really hard to do, right? In the society we live in the world we live in, it's really hard to break those conventions.
Yes.
And so however you go about doing it, however we talk about doing it, it's having the support to be able to figure that out. And honestly, I mean, the latest unleashed moment I think I've had is when I turned around when everyone was saying, you're doing this, you've got this, you're $100 million, you're going to be able to go to 250, you're going to be able to go to 500, you've got a $500 million company underneath you, you could make it to $1 billion. And I'm sitting there going, but I don't want to.
Don't want to.
Right? How much money do I need? And what is enough?
Right.
And when is it that somebody else can lead this firm? Somebody else can take this to the next level. I don't have to be the one. And so I walked away from the expectations of a whole lot of people. And really the only ones that mattered to me as to what we were doing is, my husband and my family, obviously. And he was like, go, get out. If that's what you need, I'm done watching you kill yourself. For what? Right. I felt very beholden to my team because they had brought me to that place, and I wanted to make sure they were taken care of, and I wanted to make sure that everything was working really well. But then it was, I don't have to answer to anyone else.
No more.
Except for the people around me that I care most about. I don't have to, and people thought I was nuts. And I was like, okay, but you could have gotten, but you left money on the table, but you did, I'm like, I don't care. I did fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Unexpectedly fine. I mean, better than fine. Finer than fine.
Right.
I don't think.
But then they couldn't understand why I would leave extra. Like, it was, right, because there's always this more mentality. And at some point, I sat down and said, okay, where is my enough? And so, and I know I'm never going to wear Chanel. I'm never going to drive a Bentley. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want, but it wasn't me. And so I'm sitting there and busting and going crazy. And I'm like, I want to sit with my kids. I want to be able to go to their hockey games and not worry about it. So I've hit my enough place. And that was really hard for other people to see, I think. So that was my unleashed moment.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I agree with you. Some people, it seems crazy. I know when I decided to walk away from corporate, people thought I was absolutely insane. And maybe I am, but I don't get more time, but I can get another title. And I want to have this moment where I just want to break the barriers of other people's expectations and live for me, which has been a great experience. And if I decide to go back into corporate, if I want to go back somewhere in the world, I do believe that somebody will say, okay, I like to believe that I'm intelligent enough, but I can tell you what, before I said yes to me, nobody else can say yes to me. So I needed to learn to be a little bit unruly, to be unleashed in order to find this space that I'm in. And I'm better for it, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, look, you took the risk. What's the worst that could happen, Chicken Little? And you took the risk, but there's very little real risk there. It's not like you can't go back to corporate. You had a stellar career in corporate. Anyone would hire you. So you're taking a fairly minor risk for a fairly large potential reward.
That's true. Yes, and giving myself and knowing my value proposition and having a plan. And I'm not going to be dumb about it. I mean, if I'm not going to keep running into the same wall, but I know that I have Sherpas and I have people that I can call and say, hey, am I thinking about this right? Challenge me on this. And I think that we all need to be willing, like you said, it's not as big of a risk. We make it bigger than what it is, but with this one lifetime to be able to make the impact that and be what's enough for you. So I really think that that's a great place for us to end today, and just like, what's enough for you? And I want to say thank you, Lauren. Thank you for joining me on the Unleashed Life. You've shown us that rules can be barriers or bridges, and that it takes a lot of courage to challenge convention and not just transform. You can transform not just businesses, but you can transform lives. And for those that are listening, if you want to take a deeper dive into Lauren's work, pick up the book Unruly. Lauren, where can people also find you if they wanted to follow along and learn more?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn is probably my preferred space because it lends to a little bit more of these conversations. I'm doing speaking. So if you're corporate or an entrepreneur organization or whatever, I'm doing a lot of speaking around these topics. And I've got a website. I've got a newsletter. So I'm writing all over the place because I love writing. So that's my favorite part of this. And I would love to talk to you. I'd love to hear from you guys. Buy the book anywhere you buy books. It's on Amazon, but it's also at indie bookstores, which is incredibly important to me to make sure that the indie bookstores had it. And yeah, engage. I would love to hear what you guys think about it.
Thank you so much. And yes, please get the book. It will change your life. It's transformative and it's lessons for everyone, no matter where you are in your journey. And this conversation just reminds me that living unleashed is about knowing which rules to keep and which ones to break and having the courage to choose accordingly. So thank you everyone for listening to this episode of The Unleashed Life. If this episode if you trust what we were talking about, if this touched you in any way, please share it. Please engage with us and let's help get the word out about being unruly and being unleashed and having the freedom to choose your enough. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Renée Baker and I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining us on The Unleashed Life. I hope today's episode has inspired you to break free from financial constraints and societal expectations, cultivating a mindset of abundance and possibility. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and join our vibrant online community to share your own unleashed moments and connect with like-minded individuals. Until next time, keep breaking barriers, embrace your beautiful, authentic self, and live life unleashed.